Hey, what's up? This is Kevin from Kevin's Barbecue Joints, and I'm excited to bring you my interview with Adrian Miller. He's the author of Black Smoke, African Americans in the United States of Barbecue, which is coming out in April 2021. And that's specifically why I wanted to talk and learn all about the book and how excited he was and just a lot more details. We've talked twice before. We did a barbecue city guide for Colorado, which I know Colorado is a state, but we did mostly Denver and then the outskirts. And then we also did a 10 minutes with when he was just getting into the bones of this book. So this is a catch-up as well as all about the new book and what he's been doing this last year during COVID. Adrian is one of my favorite people. He's easily one of the nicest people on the planet, and it comes across on this interview as well as the others, or if you follow him on any of his social media, he's Soul Food Scholar. He's just a great guy. This is his third book. I'll put links to all of his books below. If you want to purchase his book, you can go directly to his website. There'll be a link, and you can get an autographed copy, and he'll put whatever you want on it. Or if you get a chance, go to a local bookstore and get it. Moreover, anytime you need a book, go to a local bookstore. But I can't thank him enough for taking the time. His schedule is quite packed, and he talks about that at the beginning of this last month was a crazy month for him, and it's going to be busier and busier, especially for a lot of authors now, because of Zoom, they can do more interviews. At least that's what their agents and publishers would want them to do, because they just think they're at home. So I know you're really going to enjoy this, and the Kevin's Barbecue Joints podcast and YouTube show is brought to you by Centex Smokers. They're out of Luling, Texas. Michael Johnson, who's been welding since he was a child, which sounds crazy that a child would be welding, but he was. And so he's honed his craft, and he's awesome. And his construction is amazing. His craftsmanship is amazing. His finishes are amazing. Take a look at Centex_smokers on Instagram. Give him a DM, follow. He can give you a quote, 4 to 5 months right now. It's a lead time. Might be less for certain things, might be a little more for other things, but it's around that. I know his pricing is great, his lead time's great, and he's just a cool guy, a really nice guy. Again, that's Centex Smokers. And if you're enjoying these, please subscribe. That way you don't miss out. Do a couple of these per week. I have a website at kevinsbbqjoints.com. Social media, Kevin's BBQ Joints. But at the end, stay safe. Thanks for listening to these. Please reach out. Let me know what you're thinking. Hope you have a good week. Well, first off, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, man. I'm a little tired because Black History Month was really busy for me because the virtual world allowed me to do more events per day. So I did 26 events in 28 days.
Wow, I didn't realize that. That's a lot. That takes a lot out of you.
Yeah, because normally I would do half as much because I would be traveling someplace. Mm-hmm. And so, I would lose a couple days because it was a lot, man. So next year, lesson learned, I'm not going to do that. And part of it was giving people a break. Like I did stuff for, like for free or just low cost. And I'm just going to tell people, if you can't pay my fee, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And it protects
your time
me.
is worth something. Yeah.
Yeah.
And your time, and also your sanity and your daily, the way that you feel throughout the day. It's if you're stressed all the time or you're worrying and anticipating something, there's like that. People don't realize it's just not this slice. You've got to make it work. Well,
exactly.
So, and I think didn't you do something with Dr. Howard Conyers? I think that was one of your things, right?
Yeah. So the Museum of Food and Drink with Conyers, Dr. Conyers, and also Ed Mitchell and his son Ryan.
Oh, wow. How was that?
It was good, man. We had a really good discussion. Of course, we could have gone on forever. And then Deborah Jones of Jones Barbecue in Kansas City, she came in at the very end. And there's a very cool, they've created a cool exhibit where you get a 360 feel. Like you feel like you're in the pit.
Really?
With Deborah Jones, yeah. And I'm the narrator for the exhibit, but that was gonna unveil itself, but then COVID hit, and so it's mothballed until they can have people.
And that will be forthcoming, right? When the world it's less the way it is right now. Oh, yeah. I didn't realize it was for that. I just knew that it was you guys. And what was that like? Because Ed Mitchell I've been kind of going back and forth with his son for a little while to put together an interview, but he's been off the radar. Like, what did he talk a little bit about what he's been doing at all?
Yeah, so in COVID hit them hard too. So they have a new restaurant that they're going to open in Raleigh. They were all set to open it last spring, and then boom. So I think right now the trajectory or the timeline is opening in June.
Okay.
So I think they're just busy getting that together.
I thought they were going to do some kind of takeout concept too. Am I going crazy, or is there some kind of just to go concept? Or I don't know. I thought Robert Moss said something about something.
Yeah, no. Well, you may know more than I do because I know that. I know when I interviewed them in their restaurant, it was going to be a full service restaurant, but that was pre-COVID. So maybe they pivoted now because of COVID. But the cool thing is they got some money behind them. So
that's good.
I think I look at him and Rodney Scott, and I'm this is the first time I know of that black barbecue entrepreneurs have had some money behind them. So they may actually be able to scale it with franchises, because
Oh,
usually, their people are bootstrapping.
I hope so. And I know that I don't know the exact story of what happened with the pit, but I know that it didn't go the way he had planned. So I hope the best for him. And so what a nice guy. And it's yeah, and that's good. That is nice. That should happen. Obviously, that shouldn't be something that we're just saying. There's only two people in the United States. That is pathetic.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I think with some chains, they probably have just decided not to expand. Like, for instance, Gates, they've got multiple locations in Kansas City, and if anybody could leverage that to national,
true.
it's probably them. So, but I do remember a conversation I had with Ed Mitchell, and he, not familiar with this. He thought that he had to be there to train somebody and teach somebody. So, if you're not schooled in how to
For sure.
franchise, yeah, I think that's what held him back before. But now, he's kind of understanding that, you can be there to start it, but hopefully
That's
you have
exciting,
procedure.
actually.
Yeah, you have stuff in place that keeps it going. So,
So you interviewed the two of them for your book.
yeah, uh-huh.
So why don't we
So,
transition to the book? So your book is coming out next month.
yeah, so the book is targeted right now for a drop date of April 27th. So depending on when it comes out of from the printers, it could be earlier, but that's the safe
Okay.
date. So that's the birthday that I'm the expected date. Let me put it that way.
That's yeah. I hear you. Just like any birth, they could change.
Yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
this is really exciting. Congratulations, first off. You've been working on this for a good amount of time, and the last time we spoke this way was 2 years ago, I think.
Right. Yeah,
How
yeah.
long have you were you working on it? About a year or so before, or has it been something in the back of your mind?
It's been something in the back of my mind. So I've wanted to write this book actually since 2004.
Okay.
One thing I did that was really smart is when I was working on my soul food book, I bootstrapped all my trips to do barbecue research as well as the soul food research.
That's
So when I was in
smart.
a town, I tried to gobble up as much barbecue as I could and start
That's not a bad
getting
idea.
started. So it saved me a lot of time in terms of knowing about places
Mhm.
and being more strategic about where to revisit. But I would say more intensely. Let's see. My last book was 2017, so basically 3 years.
Yeah, I'm excited just to hear about it, and also I've ordered just so so people know you could order if you go to Adrian Miller's website you could order an autograph copy, and I forgot that I could, and I don't know if you noticed I ordered one this morning because
Oh,
I really want one. That's I want to get one in general, but I figured autograph copy would be nice.
hey,
You've always been really special in my life, and I'm excited for this. But let's talk about break down this, and then I want to know too what you learned. Did you learn it was I'm sure you were learning along the way about lots of different things.
yeah. So and first let me just say that I'm happy to autograph it by saying I couldn't have done it without you. So, I'm just so pleased you brought the book. So just let me know how you want it done. So yeah, I learned a lot of things. So one though, I think the biggest thing I learned is the Native American influence on barbecue because one of the reasons why I wrote this book is first of all, just African Americans are not getting as much love as I
Mm-hmm.
think we should in barbecue these
For sure.
days. So it's a thump on the head to say, look, what are y'all doing?
Mm-hmm.
You got to throw black people in the mix. But I wanted to really understand the history of it because the often told story of the early story of barbecue, it just doesn't make sense because it just says Europeans came to the Caribbean, they saw some indigenous people cooking on a raised platform, and they tried to approximate the word. It was called barbecue, and then the Europeans then brought that to the mainland North America with the introduction of pigs and all this other stuff, and that's where barbecue was born. And that just doesn't make sense because one, it just erases all the cooking techniques of indigenous people on the American,
True.
the North American mainland. So what were they doing? And then secondly, the way that barbecue, at least in the early years, emerges is very different from the way they're cooking in the Caribbean because they're not cooking on a raised platform. It's digging a trench,
Mm-hmm.
burning down coals, and putting a lattice on top of that and cooking whole animals. So something else happened. So I wanted to find out that early story. One of the things was, so what I did is I just went back through early European accounts of Native American cooking of meat, and I just tried to catalog what they saw in different places. And so I came up with kind of five different ways of cooking. So one is the raised platform. There were some people doing that
Mm-hmm.
in the American South,
Meaning
and then
like this or okay.
so
Or was it just strictly like raised above the earth?
yeah, raised above the earth. So very
Yeah.
similar. So like imagine fork sticks in the ground and then sticks laid across that to create
Okay.
kind of like a platform.
Yeah. Okay.
And then just pierce sticks where you would have a sharpened stick and you would have some meat on it and you would angle it towards the fire.
Okay.
And it could be just one stick or it could be a pattern of sticks. But anyway, just that, and so you would just kind of go forward and back
Uh,
to moderate the cooking. And then the spit. So there were some people doing a spit, which Europeans would have recognized. That was something that they did. And then you've got what I call the vertical hole. So more often we call it earth oven. Like something like several feet down in the ground, and then you are layering meat and vegetation on heated rocks, usually. And then you bury it and you cook it overnight, and then you open it up and smell all this deliciousness
and you
and
hope
get
that
to
you
eating.
that
Yeah,
you cooked it properly.
right. And then there's what I call a shallow pit. So typically it wasn't as deep as the vertical hole, but it was an indentation in the ground. Coals were burnt down, and sometimes rocks were put in that. And interestingly, sometimes meat was put right on top of the rocks
Huh.
to cook, or something was buffering it, but essentially that's what it was. So I argue that this trench method, and this is an educated guess because this history is just not well documented,
Mhm.
but it seems to me that when Europeans show up and add their quick grilling traditions to what Native Americans were doing, at some point somebody through trial and error or somehow maybe thinking about what they saw in the Islamic world with their kind of pit cooking, they created this pit tradition. And then enslaved Africans show up a little bit later, and for a lot of reasons, they become the go-to cooks for barbecue. But really, it was the Native American foundation of it, and then Native American enslavement, which I didn't know about.
I
So
didn't know
Native,
about that either. That makes
yeah,
sense though. But wow, that's so weird that this is the first time I'm even thinking about
yeah,
that.
yeah. And so Native Americans were, and enslaved Americans, Native Americans were the first barbecue cooks. But because Native American slavery doesn't work, colonizing whites then transitioned to African slavery,
Uh,
and so barbecue in the earliest form of it was hard work, and so the racial etiquette of the 18th, 19th centuries was if you're going to have something that requires hard work, you can make black people do it. So that's why they become the principal cooks of barbecue.
and
So
that's and that history isn't talked about at all. It's almost like it's we only hear about maybe the last 60, 70 years, really.
Yeah. And then I argue one of the reasons why barbecue becomes almost the preeminent party food of that time is because it's scalable. Because the way that barbecue develops, as long as you have enough labor to dig a long enough trench and you got people that can clear the brush and can chop down all that wood, can kill those animals and just cook them, you can have a barbecue as big as you want. So that's why barbecues get, I don't think these numbers are accurate, but you read stories about 50,000 people showing up to barbecues in Kentucky in the 1830s and stuff. I don't think that,
50,000
yeah,
people.
yeah,
Imagine that. That's a
yeah.
whole city.
And
But I could see 1,000 people. I could see 1,500. Yeah.
right. And you don't really hear about large meals like that for any other food, right?
Hmm.
And so I think that's why barbecue captures the imagination, at least for these public feasts that happen.
And so, doing this research, was this through word of mouth, or were you going to libraries, or was this online? Like, how do you? I know that once I get onto a topic, I'm focused, and so you probably were seeing it everywhere, and or seeing little nuggets of where to search. How did you come about all this information?
Well, the common thread through all of my work is the gold mine is in old newspapers.
Okay.
Because newspapers, more so than books, sought to capture daily life in a community. And so, they would look for those spectacular stories or those odd stories.
True.
And so, fortunately, we have companies that are digitizing old newspapers and magazines. And so,
That
you
helps.
just have to figure out how they talked about barbecue in that time because that's shifted.
Hmm.
And how they even talked about events, all of this stuff, like the terms for African Americans and all of that stuff is changing, right? But once you figure that out and you have the time, you can find a lot of stuff. So, my book is a different than the typical kind of diversity critique because I think somebody just hearing about my book may be thinking, oh, he's arguing that African Americans have never been celebrated in barbecue. And Kevin, I'm telling you, the main point of my book is can we just get back to what was being done before the 1990s? Because before that, it was no big deal to include African Americans in a barbecue book. In fact, it was weird if you did it, or I mean, not even a book, an article. It was weird, and we got away from that in the 1990s. So I chronicle that and show how just how really bad it became. And fortunately, we're seeing some bright signs. I think we're starting to see the ship turn, and we're starting to see more African Americans given opportunities to be in the spotlight and to make money like everybody else is making in barbecue these
Yeah,
days.
you and I both know the popularity of barbecue is
Mm-hmm.
insane, and it's growing
Mm-hmm.
exponentially, and it essentially weathered the COVID storm So yeah, so it's about time, and it's nice. And I think also what I'm imagining is that you're highlighting things.
Yeah, yeah. And so what I do is I start out with this Native American foundation, and then I show how African Americans become connected to barbecue. So much so that by the end of the 1800s, I mean, it's just blackness and barbecue are inextricably linked. I mean, and then that starts to change, of course, in time. But I just show that process, and then I really just kind of delve into black barbecue culture, like church barbecue, competition barbecue, African American business entrepreneurs, how they did barbecue, the barbecue aesthetic with African Americans. Like, what are you most likely to see if you go to a black barbecue place? And I did a whole chapter on sauce because I
That's
know the conventional wisdom is barbecue should be on sauce, but African Americans are like, who says who? So sauce is a huge part of black barbecue culture. So I talk about that. And then I get into this question about, okay, so what changed? Why do we get to a point where African Americans are pushed to the sidelines of barbecue? And my main critique is of media. Just at the time when foodies are emerging, there's a requisite kind of explosion in food media to cater to this new group. And at the very time that people get interested in barbecue and are looking for experts and looking for advice,
mhm.
we just had a non-diverse media vibe, and so essentially white dudes were offered as the experts in barbecue, and very few African Americans were highlighted. And for people who don't know, they're just like, show
Just
me where to
assume,
go,
yeah.
show me where to eat, right?
Hmm.
And so I show how all of this kind of feeds on itself, and created the need for this book.
And it is interesting too, not only African American barbecue spots or barbecue. It's I feel like there's a certain group of barbecue places that are highlighted, and then the rest go to the wayside. And it seems like there's a lot of off the beaten path places, African American and non-African, that are just not even talked about or not even explored. And that makes me sad because there's a lot of people putting out great barbecue, and it might not be that craft barbecue or the whatever is the cool thing to, but it's really great, or a really great chopped beef sandwich, or a something,
Yeah,
or just really great ribs. But it might not, it's not, it's so there's certain things too that the media seems to gravitate towards. And I'm glad you're
right.
doing this. Yeah, I'm really glad you're doing this.
Yeah, and it's endemic. I think it's a problem within the media, the restaurant industry, and especially food media at large. Because if you don't have a PR person
Hmm.
who can keep you in front of the right people and stuff, unless somebody in the media has that intrepid spirit and they're like, I'm gonna find that place, that it just doesn't happen. And I'm a little sympathetic to especially like people in newspapers now, because of slash budgets and all this kind of stuff, they have more on their plate than ever.
For sure.
So it does take a commitment to find these places. But my argument is, you're writing to serve your community, right? and
Hmm.
and believe it or not, the people reading your website, newspaper, whatever, they want to find out about those
Yeah.
places.
Uh-huh. That diamond in the rough for anything in life is awesome,
Yeah,
especially for us, for barbecue places. When you turn off a road and you went to a place, you want to tell all your friends, but also you want to keep it a secret because it's
yeah, because you don't want to wait in line forever, right?
exactly. But also too, it's interesting. A thousand questions are coming through my head, but with the Jones sisters, it's interesting how with the right publicity, the right, like it just took, all it took was like a grain of like the proper use, and look how much business they've done and how things have changed so much for them.
Right, and they've been in the game for at least a couple decades, right?
Yes.
But that Queer Eye show
Just
completely changed their
yeah,
trajectory, and I'm glad because they're wonderful
I
people
am
and
so
they
glad.
put out, yeah, they put out good stuff. But yeah, it's just one of those things. So I'm trying to get to a point where it's not so much based on chance
Yeah, you go.
that
No, exactly. And I think
yeah,
you're slowly chipping away
yeah.
at that opportunity. Do you list places in your book?
Yeah, so one thing I want people to understand is this is not really a travel log. So it's not me driving across the country, although I did that. It's not me, saying,
That's your
"Hey,
Twitter account, or
yeah, yeah." It's really the history, and then what I do is I do 16 profiles. So I highlight certain people across history that I think tell a barbecue story well. But because I know people want to know that, at the very end of the book, I list my top 20.
which is probably hard to do, but also, I guess, necessary. And then yeah, people are always clamoring for that, but that's not what this book's about. And I'm sure
Yeah.
you could put together something someday or talk about it on shows like this or whatever. It's like,
Yeah, yeah, I could definitely do that. But because my own feeling is that the barbecue travelogue has been done, and
and it,
so
yeah.
I just didn't see anybody who had written what I think is a comprehensive history of African American barbecue.
Do you see is there a blend with soul food too? Like, is there some, like, there's overlapping, right?
There's overlap, and that's actually what got me into barbecue first because I knew I was going to write about soul food, and one thing I noticed is that most black-run barbecue joints have soul food sides. And then soul food restaurants usually have a barbecue option. Now, truth be
That's
told, a lot of people are baking and pouring barbecue sauce over it
mhm.
and calling it barbecue, but that it's part of that culture. So I think there is some kind of connection. But and people often ask me, "Is barbecue soul food?" And I say, "Nah, I just really think it's its own thing."
What
Yeah.
did you learn along the way too with all your travels? Like before COVID, what were you? Because it seemed like you were eating so much food, and so
Yeah.
were there little highlights or things that you found throughout the way?
Yeah, so I discovered quote unquote a couple of regional barbecue regions that I don't think get a lot of love.
Okay.
There's no reason why the south side of Chicago should not be considered a barbecue region because their specialty is rib tips with
Hmm.
hot link sausages and fries all drowned in sauce. So I'm not you don't have to love a style to not recognize it, right?
Hmm.
But that's when you go to south side Chicago, man, that's what
It's so
barbecue is.
unique. It's so unique.
Yeah. And then East Texas. I mean, when most people say Texas barbecue, they just focus on the central part,
Hmm.
which is a tradition, but in the South, you've got Latinos who were doing barbecue before Texas was even a state. And then in the East, that's where Southern barbecue enters, with slaveholders relocating from other parts to East Texas. And as early as the 1830s, we've got accounts of barbecues being done with blacks cooking. That whole Beaumont area was another place that I discovered. And what surprised me is the Creole influence. So you can have barbecue, but there will be Creole side dishes
Huh.
along with the soul food. So like dirty rice. They have a boudin sausage tradition. So those kind of things. So those that was interesting to me.
Yeah, yeah. Have you traveled much during COVID?
No, man, I had to shut it down. My deepest regrets are there were two places I just did not get to. So one was I didn't get to really go hit LA, and so three places: LA and the Bay Area. I wanted to eat my way through those places again, and I really wanted to try Matt Horn's barbecue in Oakland because that guy is getting so much press, which makes me wonder if he does have a PR person working for him. But yeah, so I love what he's doing. So I want to try his food. And the other places, I just wanted to get to St. Louis. I just think there's a
St. Louis is one place I have not gone, and I've been so curious as to what's going on there, and it seems also it's eclectic. There seems like a lot of different things going on in St. Louis.
Yeah, I just think there's a real story there,
Hmm.
and I
I
just
agree.
I just I just didn't get to really explore it. So those are places. I mean, of course, there's other places I wanted to go to, but those are the places I really wanted to hit. And just as I was thinking about going to those places, COVID happened, and what the real thing that bums me out is the very weekend that the lockdown was imposed, I was supposed to be in San Antonio for a meeting, and I was going to drive to Brownsville to get that real taste of authentic
Uh,
barbacoa.
uh,
Oh man. So,
so hopefully, do you think that you'll be traveling maybe this summer, maybe fall, summer, fall, like you'll get a chance to go back on the road?
yeah, I mean the vaccine news is good, and it
Great
seems like
news, yeah.
there might be stuff available even earlier. Because I was thinking I probably won't get a shot till June, but now I'm thinking I'll get it maybe even at the end of this month
Yeah, which is crazy. Yeah,
or
which
early
is really,
next month.
because you're in Colorado still,
Yeah,
right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
I'm in
think in
Colorado.
like in Texas, 50 and old. I'm 50, 50 and older is starting Monday, and I saw somewhere I think Los Angeles is like 18 to 64 with underlying conditions. I have
Yeah,
asthma, so I don't know if that. There's hopeful news, and it seemed like I saw on I think on the Smoke Sheet on their newsletter they had actually had events listed, and they haven't had them for a year. They actually had some coming up, like Windy City Smokeout is coming as so that
oh
in
wow,
July. So like
wow.
people are actually booking events, which that is unheard of. I didn't even think they do things
Yeah,
till fall, maybe, but
yeah. So that because yeah, I thought I was just gonna do stuff in fall, and right now all of my book tour events, quote unquote, are virtual.
okay.
But there are more people now reaching out to me for in person, and I'm as long as we're outside, I'm
Mhm.
good.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd be a little nervous about an indoor thing,
All right,
even
yeah.
though vaccinated, but outdoor is cool.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
think I think I actually will get some things in this summer.
Yeah, so those are three places that you're definitely interested in visiting. And what about the do you cover at all Texas and their road to? Is so then there's an African American history in Texas as well, right?
Yeah, so Texas looms large in my book, and I don't know if you agree, but I would say that Central Texas, is now the definitive barbecue style.
Mm-hmm.
Even in a place like Denver, we had 6 places open last year. 5 of them were Texas style.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree
Central.
completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the center of gravity in the barbecue world, in my opinion. So I spend a lot talking about not only Texas but Texas media and Texas Monthly, in particular, about its role in kind of downplaying East Texas, elevating Central Texas, and that was one big push in kind of moving African Americans to the sidelines.
Interesting, because that's
barbecue.
Is East Texas? I guess could Houston be considered East Texas? Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm throwing it. I mean, now some Texans argue with me, but I tell them, like, look, I'm looking at the map, and Houston is on the east side of the state. East of it.
No, I know. I was asking someone. I think there's like a Facebook group about like North Texas barbecue addicts or something, and I'm like, what does North Texas mean? Like exactly what? And they and there actually was like someone gave like a radius. Like I'm like, okay. I was actually kind of like being facetious, but I guess that's true. There is.
Yeah.
So East Texas, yeah. Okay. So when you're saying that, you're saying like more of like east of Central Texas.
Correct. Yeah. So I talk about how East Texas barbecue has a lot of the same elements, right? But it's just presented differently. Like East Texas barbecue is messier. Mm-hmm. Like the brisket's going to be chopped up. It's going to be sauce, pork spare ribs, all this kind of other stuff. Yeah. So East, I definitely talk about Texas.
JC does his best at trying to highlight places, but I think they're not on people's mind. They're thinking about the new hip places.
Right. And so in my top 20, I have 2 Houston places that I just think belong there.
What are they?
Burns, Original Barbecue,
mm-hmm.
and then Ray's. Man, both of those places were slamming.
Wow. I just saw because I got Discovery Plus. Long story, but I got it, and I watched a thing. I think it was Roger Mookie. He went to Burns.
Oh, nice. Okay,
and it was so interesting to see. Just to see their style and see what he does, and he did like a rib, like almost like a rib sandwich, but it was like stacked ribs with the bone and everything. I'm sure
awesome.
You're supposed to with onion, and I'm sure you're supposed to eat it and tear it apart.
Yeah.
But that's awesome. Yeah, but Burns looked awesome. It looked like and I'm like, how is this off my radar?
Yeah, exactly.
And Ray's, I'm not. I know there's a Ray's in Austin. What's this Ray's in Houston? What am I? I feel sad that I don't know that.
Different spot. I don't know Houston that well, so I wish I could tell you.
Yeah.
It was on Old Church Road or something like that. But man, I went there on a Friday. I went there in a time when I thought it was going to be dead and bustling, and just some really good barbecue, man. And I was just very impressed.
Okay.
I mean, Houston's just a great eating town anyway. Mm-hmm. I don't think Houston gets as much love as it should as one of our great eating cities because, man, whew. They got some stuff there.
I'm excited. I'm excited to be released from this LA COVID trap and visit. But Houston, that's okay. And so, do you have any other places in Texas on your list? I'm sure there's 1,000 places outside of Texas you could put on the list.
Yeah, I think I might have put. I can't remember. I think I might have put Patillo's down, which is in Beaumont. So that's one of the oldest barbecue places. Have you been there?
I have not. No, I've talked to them before. But
yeah, it's one of the oldest barbecue joints in the country. If I did put another place, it probably was Patillo's because I think I had a whole section just for. Oh, you know what? Fargo's. Fargo's in what is that town? It's not too far from. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I know. I put them. I think I had a whole category just for Texas.
Okay.
So I probably did Patillo's, Ray's, Birds, and Fargo's.
And you'll have to buy the book to find the rest out. I know.
Exactly.
But also too, like if you could spend months traveling around the South, going to small little places, off the beaten path places, and that's something people should do, and I hope that they do.
And the other thing is, and it's just I didn't have the resources and the time to do this, but I didn't want to be so restaurant focused too, because the brother or sister on the side of the road with the oil drum or the kettle, that's a vibrant part of the culture. Sure. And, you just have to drive around and find those people, right? And also strip club parking lots. That's another. I don't know why, but anyway. So there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are just doing their thing, and they're known in their communities, and it's hard to get those stories.
But you see that in Los Angeles a lot. I'll be driving somewhere, I'll be going through a neighborhood, and I'll think I need to remember where that is because I want to go back and try. And you'll see a guy and you see 15 people around eating
Yeah,
little chairs around, and it's just
yeah.
that's probably a daily or multiple day thing.
Yeah. So, that's a whole part of the book that could, that could be a second volume, just exploring that.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe even a TV show.
I think
I
it's
don't
a
know.
TV show.
But
I think so.
yeah. But
Internet TV show because
yeah, yeah.
if
So
Daniel
there's just
Brown can get a TV
yeah,
show, it's hard
yeah,
for.
yeah. But
Yeah.
it's just easier to research
Mm-hmm.
restaurants because they're a known quantity, they're in a place, you know when they're going to be open.
So then you delve into, because I know that when I've done research or talked to people about it, that there was a lot of barbecues at churches, also at political events, and then
Mhm.
the I think, and it might have been again with Conyers, Dr. Conyers, entertainments or something. Is that? And these are terms that like I never heard of entertainments like that for that
Yeah,
term.
no, that's an old school term. I didn't put it down that way. So I talk about in history. I talk about the emancipation barbecues.
Oh wow.
So there were a whole barbecue was connected to emancipation celebrations, and the interesting thing is there were a
Wow.
patchwork of these celebrations in the 1800s, because before the Civil War here, African Americans in the North would celebrate the emancipations of African heritage people in other parts of the world. So
Wow.
when England ended the slave trade, or freed all the enslaved people in the Caribbean, that was a day that people celebrated before we had our own.
Huh.
And then even in the United States, there were days that were tied to when the Emancipation Proclamation was announced,
Okay.
which Lincoln does in late September. So some people celebrated that day. The emancipation of the West Indies was August 1st. Some people celebrated that day, and then there was August. So there was a whole bunch of days. And the
Huh.
interesting thing that happened now is that Juneteenth has just overtaken all of them. So supplanted, I should say. I shouldn't overtaken sound so hostile, but has supplanted all of these
That's
other
a planting
traditions. So
sound.
yeah, so now it's like there's momentum coalescing to making Juneteenth a national holiday, and that would be the preeminent emancipation celebration. So it was fun to me to look at all those. And then I talk about political barbecues, and there's two stories there. So white politicians would often hire an African American to cook the barbecue for their political rallies, and then you had African Americans barbecuing on their own terms, and how that got mixed results from local whites. Some whites were very hostile to that, and they would show up and start mess.
Really?
Yeah, and people would
I guess.
die. Yeah, people would get killed, and then of course the white newspaper headline would be deadly. They would call them Negro barbecues, or deadly colored barbecue. And then
And
there are
was
others.
that for like a for-profit barbecue type event kind of thing, like a paid event that people went to, or was that just a so? Oh wow, that's
Yeah,
terrible.
no, it was just a free thing because the ethos of the time was that whoever was hosting the barbecue was supposed to pay for everything.
Okay.
And that changes in the 20th century. Then we start by the time you get to the late 1900s or 1800s, you start hearing about subscriptions, and that's basically buying a ticket.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so that changes. But the ethos before 1900 was if you're throwing the barbecue, you pay for everything. And so people would just show up. The barbecue you get would be different than what we would recognize because it was just basically you got your long line, you had your plate, and you got a hunk of meat, some bread, and some coffee, and keep it moving. So that
Wow. And
was
it was they're doing hogs, right? Generally.
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, well, actually, no,
And
I got
goat.
to take that back because that was another surprise. I had bought into this whole narrative that, hey, it was pretty much just everybody's doing hogs. But if you go back and look at the sources, it could be a cow, could be a pig, could be a
Okay.
sheep.
Interesting.
Sometimes it was all
Large cuts
three.
of like that, probably like just like a quarter of a cow or something. I wonder how they
Right.
die. Yeah.
The cow was the only thing that they cut up because it was just too big.
Yeah.
But the hogs and the sheep, they definitely did whole.
Interesting.
And and I'm borrowing Robert Moss's scholarship, but it's really not until you get to the late 1800s, early 1900s that you start to see this focus on lesser cuts of meat, like, and I think that's a product of the advent of restaurant culture.
Mhm.
So I talk about those things, and it's a different skill set because as a cook, what do you know? It's a lot easier to cook something when you cut it up into smaller pieces
Mhm.
than to cook it as a whole, and that goes for a chicken
Uh-huh.
or anything, right?
Definitely.
And so, yeah, the shift from rural barbecue to urban barbecue reflects this move from whole animal cooking to going smaller cuts of meat.
How did it feel when you finished this? Or do you feel like it's like a part two is already in your soul.
I think a part two is already in my soul. I don't know if there, we'll see if there's an appetite for that because there's a lot you leave out, and I think there's different ways to maybe tell the story. Because to this book is more of an argument than my other books because I mean, I got a point to make because with the soul food book and the president's cooking book that I did, it was more like, hey, this is probably something you don't know. It's an interesting part of history, and there's a lot of that in this book. But this book was really about it's ridiculous that African Americans are not being celebrated in barbecue, and here's why.
And how long is the book?
So I think when it's all done with the editing, it's a little less than 300 pages. But I got footnotes and a bibliography, so all that stuff is in there. So I guess reading wise, maybe like 250 pages, something like that.
No, I'm so excited to get it, and I'm excited that we had talked about this so long ago, and it's weird that it's actually coming out now in less than just about a month. That's
Yeah,
amazing. Must feel
and it's
weird.
got
It's got like a weird anticipation, huh?
Yeah, and it's getting early, but it's getting good buzz. Kirkus Reviews, which is one of the premier literary criticism
Yeah,
organizations, gave it a starred review, and they
nice.
don't like anything.
No, no, it's not
So
easy to get.
yeah, so that's a very promising sign. And just galleys are going out now, so some of the people reading it are like, man, this is really good.
Cool. That's a good.
So
That must make
yeah.
you feel good.
Yeah, it does, because it's validating. Because I gotta tell you, I had to drink a lot of haterade about this book. It was really hard to get literary agents and publishers interested in it.
Is it just because the subject matter is something they don't want to touch or something? Or is
No,
it just it's hard to get something published anyways?
I just think it's because it's me. Because it's me and it's my idea. I tell people whenever I'm feeling too
Just
good
don't like
about, yeah, whenever I'm feeling too good about myself, I'm just gonna offer an idea to a commercial publisher just so they can reject it.
it. Just so you can feel worse about yourself.
Yeah, yeah,
That's always, and it's so interesting too. I've watched how over the years, like it seems like there's a lot. I don't want to say fans, but it seems like you have a lot more interaction with people. Like people are really excited. I think this is the perfect time, I feel, for you to put this book out. I think this book 3 years ago, with with social media and with different things, I feel like you've come into your own, and I feel like I could hear your voice in your social media,
yeah.
and I think that's important. I think that people gravitate towards that, and I think that should help sales and help at least people be interested in knowing like what is this thing that he's put out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so yeah, it's gonna be interesting. Because again, it's a lot like my books in some ways, but it's very different in some ways too. So I'm interested to see how people react to it. I don't know how people are gonna receive that message.
Yeah.
Um, because, but my ultimate message is this: I'm definitely not trying to say white people can't cook barbecue. I'm just saying there's enough room at the cookout for everybody.
I agree.
And so it's just messed up to just consume all of this barbecue media that just focuses on white dudes.
Hmm. Yeah.
It just doesn't square with reality.
Hmm.
And so the cool thing, and I'm happy to report this, is that I end the book on by pointing out the helpful signs. J.C. Reed, who you mentioned, John T. Edge, Daniel Vaughn of Texas Monthly. All of these guys are writing about barbecue, and I think in an inclusive way.
Hmm.
So I think they're trying to point out, be more diverse in their coverage. I criticized the Barbecue Hall of Fame early in the book, but I'm on the board now, and we're working hard to have more diverse choices. And then, for the first time, okay, dig this. So Rodney Scott and some other people, African Americans, are coming out with barbecue books. What do you think has been the gap since an African American barbecuer has, someone who's actually a practitioner of the craft, put out a cookbook?
That's I can't even guess. I can't. When was?
All right. So if you're going to be technical about it, it's been since 1988.
Wow.
Now,
Whoa.
if you include Stubbs, Stubbs in Austin,
Hmm.
he's got some other people bought his estate. So there's a posthumous
Yeah,
cookbook
I
that
remember
came out
that
in
book. Yeah,
'95. Right. So you could say that's 25 years. But other than that, it's been Lois
30
Eric.
something
Yeah,
years.
yeah. It's been Lois Eric Eli, he's a writer, right? But he wrote one of the best barbecue books out there. Al Roker, he's a weatherman. Some other people. So
Yeah.
it's been, so what's the deal with that? And think about how many books on
That
barbecue come out.
what are all the different ways that people can get your book and find and follow you and everything else?
Yeah, so if you want it autographed directly from me, you could go to soulfoodscholar.com. In the navigation bar, there's about my books. and I'm happy to sign it any way you'd like.
Yeah,
I'm a big supporter of local bookstores, so ask them if they have it. If they don't, ask them to order it. And then I have book
exactly.
plate stickers that I can send to you.
Oh,
Just holler at me through my website, and I can autograph it, and then you can just affix it to the inside.
oh,
And
cool.
then it's going to be available on, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. I don't know about an audiobook yet. I have not been contacted about that, so just
That'll be
that
great.
form I don't know.
Okay, well, that'll be exciting. And what are all the different social media ways to get a hold of you?
Well, I try to make it easy, so pretty much I'm Soul Food Scholar on every platform. So Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I have a Facebook fan page.
Oh
Those are
yeah,
the
yeah.
ways to get me. Yeah.
Okay, I'll put links to all that below. And Adrian, thank you for taking the time. And I'm so glad that your book's finally coming out. I'm excited, and maybe in a few months from now, maybe we reconnect just to see how things are going and what you've learned since then. And I think that'd be great to kind of catch up. But thank you for taking the time. Have a good weekend. I'm glad to actually see you. It's nice. It's been 2 years, so it's been a long
Yeah,
time.
excellent. Yeah, so thanks for having me on your show again, and I appreciate you.
Excellent. I appreciate you, and I look forward to eating some food in person with you someday soon. Hopefully.
Oh yeah, yeah. Maybe we'll do it in St. Louis.
That sounds great. Yeah, actually, that is a good. Okay, that's the plan. That's the goal. That sounds good. Excellent. Well, take care. Good to see you. Have a good weekend. All
All
right.
right, peace.
See ya.